And we call the meeting to order, and I'm required by law to inform you that the town will audio and video record this meeting, and any persons intending to either audio or video record this session are required to inform the chair. Anybody gonna record? No. Okay. First matter is Ronald M. Remondino and Lisa Stoker.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive an email from the representative, William Kroll, seeking a continuance to September, whatever the next meeting is, 10th?
No, thank you.
Yes.
September 10th.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, somebody want to make that?
I move that we continue the public hearing PB 2019-22, Ronald Remondino and Lisa Stoker, till September 10th, 2019, no earlier than 6:30 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? So be it. Okay.
This one, you do need to read the notice in its entirety. You do need to open this public hearing. It's never
Okay.
been opened before.
Okay, this matter is, wait a minute.
It's the only thing we have?
Yeah, because they've asked for continuance.
Yeah. So that's what he's got to
Just
read.
item B, Joe.
No, he has to read,
I see it.
he has to read
You just
this,
have to read
Item
it
B.
in.
item B.
Okay.
Read that paragraph.
You got it, Joe?
Yeah, PB 2019-29, Davenport Company's applicant and prospective buyer, care of Filippo Sholomidi, PLS, representative, estate of James G. Marceline as owner, seeks approval of a 4-lot definitive subdivision, including one panhandle lot pursuant to 325-18Q and 400 of the Code of the Town of Harwich and Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81K through GG. The property is located at 79 Headwaters Drive, map 81, parcel C1, in the RR zoning. And it's my understanding that the matter has been requested. Letter from Mr. Filippo.
Sholomidi.
Sorry, Philip, but it's Sholomidi, I think.
It is.
Dear Ms. Greenhalgh, please allow us to continue the planning board review of the referenced definitive plan to the September 24th, 2019 meeting. This additional time will allow us the chance to further review the subdivision with the Board of Health. Thank you sincerely.
I move that we continue the public hearing for PB 2019-29, Davenport Companies, until September 24th, 2019, no earlier than 6:30 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So be it. Okay, so that's two that we've moved to the 24th. Next matter,
To the 10th.
One to the 10th, one to the 24th.
what was the first one?
The
The
10th.
10th.
September 10th.
Okay,
Romandino's the 10th.
all right,
Anita Stoker.
okay. Next matter, just give me a minute to get the pile in front of me here. First Crush Winery, Cape Cod LLC applicant, Frank D. and Diane M. Tuzio owners, seek approval of a modification of a site plan review special permit related to parking regulations and for a new use special permit for retail sales in the Industrial Limited I-L. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich. The property is located at 527 Building C, Main Street, map 39, parcels K 6 through 16, 17, and 18 in the IL zoning district. And we'll open the public hearing. Can you come up?
Should I come here?
You can sit and be comfortable or
We just as
stand?
soon have you come all the way up forward.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, can you tell us what you want?
Well, nothing much. We're not making any changes to our buildings in any way other than to demonstrate to you that we have parking facilities adequate to our small proposed retail space. Our viability of our winery has reached a point where it is necessary for us to move in this direction. We were approved long ago by the town of Harwich to manufacture wine, and as we've evolved through our learning aspect of a winery, it's become such that we would like to sell wine in the winery as well.
In fact, you do it now.
Well, to some degree, it's been done, yes.
And I'm looking around, I'm probably the only one on this board that was there at your opening,
Yes.
when you first established it.
We had no idea, Diane and I, what would happen to us over the years, and it's changed. And social media and the popularity of what we've established is such.
Okay. Okay, I have a proposed site plan. Everybody has one in front of them. Anybody have any questions with respect to it?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
can I ask for Charlene's report?
Of course.
Mr. Chairman, so Dr. Fuzio, we've met numerous times to kind of get this plan where it needed to be, and we're there, yay.
She's been very helpful to guide us through this.
Doctor, just so we're clear, you're a right?
Optometrist,
Optometrist.
retired now.
Okay,
My son Matthew has our practice in East Harwich.
okay. Thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just like once a Marine, always a Marine. There are several waivers being requested in light of the fact that all they're doing is adding parking on existing pavement. There's no changes in anything on the site except additional lineage. So they do need waivers from 2 sets of drainage counts, a legend of all symbols, names and addresses of owner of record on the plan, names, deeds, plans, references of all direct abutters, gross area of wetlands and upland for the total acreage, marked areas subject to wetlands, lighting, easement, freestanding signs, traffic, circulation arrows, specifications and details for lighting, curbing, fencing, retaining walls, parking and wheel stops, landscaping plan, and building plan. Again, this was approved back in
2000, probably 11, was it 11 or 12?
Yeah,
Well,
the use was approved for the winery in 2012, but the site plan was done even further back than that.
Right.
So based on that, the health department, the septic is adequate for retail use at this time. Septic system is not designed for food service, and no food is to be prepared on the site. And applicants do realize that. Building engineering and conservation had no concerns. With regard to my comments, the site has gone through 2 prior reviews. The only change to the site itself is the addition of 9 parking spaces on existing pavement. Staff have met several times with the representatives for First Crush. The retail sales area is actually quite small at 444 square feet. At this time, I have no concerns with the application, and I do recommend that the Board of Health condition be included along with standard conditions. Other than that, I really have nothing more to say.
Anybody on the board? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Charlene, the fire and police did not.
We sent it
Were
to
they-
them. They did not
they were-
return
oh,
comments.
Okay. The reason I ask is I took a ride out there, and I have some concerns about the location of the proposed parking. And I think that the fire department needs to, excuse me, weigh in on that.
The town engineer did review the location of the parking even before they made application.
Right.
And fire was at that meeting, I believe, so they have seen it and were not concerned about it when they
So,
reviewed it.
Am
for
I correct,
instance-
Doctor, that the parking that you're asking for is in front of essentially in front of your premises?
Correct. My
Go ahead, I didn't
buildings,
mean to interrupt you. but
Sure.
my retail space sets back from all the other buildings.
I know what it is, yeah.
And we have unopposed traffic, there's no traffic issues right in front of our building because our buildings are in a perfect location for people to comfortably come in and,
You're right off the road.
Right.
not off, which road do you mean?
Main Street.
Main Street.
I assume you mean
Yeah.
Main Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, you weren't
No
finished.
problem. Well, when I took a ride out there, parking space number 1 is shown on the site plan, is in front of an overhead door. Parking space number 1 and 2 in front of, it appears to be a fire department standpipe connection. Parking space number 3 is in front of the gas meter. Parking space number 4 is in front of an overhead door. And parking space number 9 is in front of an electrical panel. I'm not the one to make that decision, but I would think the fire department would want to take a look at that, even though, as you said,
Yeah,
the town engineer looked at it, but not for this application.
Fire also gets these. We got no response from the fire department.
Can we reach out to the fire department and ask for feedback as to these items? I consider them to be safety items, but again, I'm not fire chief.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think for Charlene's point is she sends them out and sometimes they don't respond because they have no concerns. It's not that they didn't look at it, it's that they had no concerns.
Oh,
They usually,
The fire inspector.
Or they would
the
say,
fire inspector-
fire department has no
Correct.
concerns, but
I
we don't
have
have
a
that.
yearly fire inspection by the town of Harwich. He's, every year since I started, and he's never had any issues with any, and he sees exactly where, and the parking spaces have lines in, that they've kind of gotten worn over the years, but they've been there since before we bought the buildings. And he's always given us a pat on the back, thumbs up, everything is copacetic.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
if I may, through you to Charlene or to the applicant, because I don't know who's gonna better answer the question. How does the parking on this plan relate versus to where it is currently? Is it just being, and it's actually
It's-
always been there,
It's always
or?
been there. It's always been
There's
there.
actually parking being relocated. Right now, there is parking, if you look at your plan, along the purple, closest to
Yep.
Main Street. There are parking spaces there which were not supposed to have been there, so those are being removed. And so they're being shifted a little bit, but there's always been parking where he's showing it now, and he's showing what he needs for the parking now.
So they're not new spaces, so where
They're
Craig
really not
has
new.
concerns, those aren't new spaces, those have been spaces.
Yeah, the only new spaces may be 6 and 7, or 8 and 7. You have 2 6s, so the,
We own that other building, number 16, which is the skinny building to the left in purple.
yeah.
And,
Yeah, and then
And there'll be 2 spaces in front of that.
and our needs, our proposed needs, according to the town's regulations, are 7, and on this site plan, as we've demonstrated 9.
So, excuse me, Mr.
Go ahead.
The bay with the door where the green is, where that bay is, we never use that at all. That's not something that's ever.
That's not your retail space, Doc?
It's behind it.
Yeah, the
but it's not
retail is
where
in the
it-
green.
It's not where you
I gotcha.
access it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so following up with Mary's question, just point of clarification. These, you're before us to add parking spaces?
bad
No,
idea.
you're before us to
To-
do
Well,
what
it was a
about
re-
parking
it was-
spaces?
if, through you, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, go ahead.
So the retail establishment happened before they got approval. You need a special permit in the industrial zone for retail use. When the Puzios went to get a pouring license to actually do tastings, that's when it was realized that, oops, they're doing retail without a special permit for retail. So that's the crux of why they are here. When we looked at the site plan to see what was approved back in God knows when, and then back in 2011 or 12, we realized that where they were actually parking was not where what was approved on the original plan. It morphed into this. So they're bringing this plan into, compliance isn't the right word, but into jive with what is actually happening on the ground.
So
Doctor,
if
I just
Go ahead.
one question. The piece of the building to the left of the parking spaces, do you use that?
It's storage. It's a storage unit.
And what do you store there?
My equipment, I don't like to keep my winery equipment outdoors, my presses, my crushers, forklift, they're inside. And bottles, empty bottles.
Is my memory any good? Don't you have like a co-op?
Yeah,
What's that about?
that's how the winery started. That's where people actually can reserve our product and participate in some of the winemaking events if they choose.
I thought I remembered that. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just trying to clarify in my own head. We said they're not before us to add spaces. The spaces that they had were adequate for the operation and also the new retail operation, but that they were in a different location, and now we're showing them on the site plan in the
Where they
location
are
that
right
they
now.
should be. So that prompts my question. When everybody talked about the fire department and the fire marshal went out and is blessed at every time, if these were not used for parking at the time the fire marshal was
No,
out
they
there.
have been, that's what I'm trying to explain.
Okay, that's what I'm not
Yeah.
understanding,
That's where
sorry.
the fire marshal parks when he comes over.
Yeah, the parking morphed over time so that what essentially this configuration is what exists. This is how they have been parking.
Today.
Today.
But
One at a
prior
time.
to
Okay.
that, you
Go
said
ahead,
the parking
Mary.
was
If I
somewhere
can,
else.
if I can add
It
some
was
clarification.
approved on a prior plan as something else.
Before
They
we were a
didn't-
winery,
Yeah,
when the site plan was originally introduced to the town, we weren't there. And so they only showed the parking they needed to get their project passed.
right.
If I can give you a little
ahead.
kind of perspective, think of this as an as-built. Like we would
Yes,
get an
thank you.
as-built. This is
This.
essentially an as-built that's coming years later, but it's what they're actually doing. It's what has been done, but it's not what the old site plan said. So this is just correcting that as an as-built, so that
Right.
coming to us to say, okay, we'll bless this as a change to the site plan.
Right.
Because the site plan can't get changed with us voting on it. So
Without us, what?
correct, so,
Yeah.
so this is kind of bringing it up to speed and making the plan that's approved by us and that would may get recorded to, what's actually happening.
Okay, anybody else on the board?
I just want to add, I am not against the retail operation at all. I think it's great. I've been to Sonoma and Napa, and it's a beautiful concept, so I'm all in favor of it. I'm just concerned about public safety.
Sure.
Okay.
That's all.
And as I said, I do get inspected yearly by the fire
Okay.
commission.
Anybody in the public who wishes to be heard? Seeing nobody, what's your desire? Do you want to continue it, or do you want to, it's up to you.
Well, I would like to hear from the
Fire department, okay?
But if the consensus is the fire department,
I can't make
Mr. Chairman, I
them
think that needs to
respond.
be a motion, and we need to vote on it.
Absolutely, sure. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we continue so that we can be sure that the fire department and police department, if appropriate as well.
Continue to September 10th or September 24th?
You need a second before you can discuss.
Wait, anybody going to second that?
Oh, you can't close the public hearing if you're continuing.
Yeah. Anybody
So
second?
I'll second out of courtesy.
Okay, thank you.
It's necessary.
All those, and the continuance date is?
The 10th?
Well, I think Mary's got a question.
So my question is, do we think the fire department's gonna respond? Have
I
they
don't know,
already-
I can't make them respond,
Okay,
We just have asked staff to contact them and say,
which we've already done.
and tell them what happened here tonight.
Well, I could contact them and
That's not
express
It's
my
not appropriate.
concerns.
Yeah,
That's not appropriate for an
Yeah.
individual board member to go to a staff member.
Okay.
okay.
It
Can
needs to go through
somebody?
that. Yes, I
as Joe
will, I'll
said-
do it again, but I
Oh,
can't
okay.
guarantee that they're actually
Oh,
Don't react.
understood.
going to
But
comment.
I'll give you my notes, so that
I don't need your notes. With no disrespect, I don't need your notes.
So
Go ahead, one at a time. He was next, I think.
I'd like to clarify. The parking places that they're asking for approval for the new use have been there and have been used for many years.
Correct.
And I'm not so sure it's a new use.
Well, we're legalizing the use. They need a use special permit to have retail there. The
That's-
winery is approved, it's the
So,
retail
so what
only.
we're discussing here is whether or not the town officials have done their job over the years to determine whether or not those parking spaces are safe or not. And this is not what they have just inspected, they've been looking at them for years. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Can I just ask for a point of clarification?
There has been no vote, been no motion to a date and time certain.
That was my question. So I think Joe had started, and I don't know that we've finished that. So,
The motion is to continue the matter to September 10th, I think.
No later than 6:30.
okay.
With the expectation that the fire department will receive from staff the list of concerns I have about the parking spaces, and that they will respond back to us before the continuation.
And my understanding is there was a courtesy second.
Who's a courtesy second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
It fails to get continued.
It fails.
So now,
A special permit, in order to be granted, needs 5 board members voting in the affirmative.
Did we ever close the public hearing?
I gotta do
No,
It
that.
hasn't happened yet.
We're getting there. Motion to close the public hearing.
Second. I'll make the motion.
So
Somebody second it.
I'll second for courtesy.
Okay? All those in favor?
Wait,
Discussion?
Thank you.
Oh, discussion? Somebody want to talk about it?
I'm just concerned, based on the last vote, that if there's only 4 board members who are willing to vote in favor of this application, it will not pass. So,
And then what they're doing is
is,
not legalized.
I understand.
Or automatically continued?
no?
No.
So,
If it fails for lack of a majority vote, is what you're saying, right?
yes, sir.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion, there's a motion on the floor. So I would request that the motion get withdrawn
Who moved
this
it?
time.
In all honesty, I'm concerned that there's not going to be 5 members voting in favor of approval of this
That's why I'm
application. And then it would not pass.
And that's why I'm asking for
So, I
to give,
think the applicant would rather
let
have
Craig
it
get his-
continued.
I'm concerned that no disrespect to you,
It's fine.
that we're trying to do something that is not our job. Staff has done its job, and if the town officials who have been looking at these parking places for years have not found anything wrong with it, how does anything ever get done in this town if we're going to look at it like that?
Well, what's your pleasure?
I think we ought to make a motion to approve this and pass
Well,
the motion.
you do have a motion and second on the table to close it.
and if if it closes and doesn't pass, then they're, the applicant
Okay.
should have the opportunity to withdraw without prejudice,
What's your
so he
question?
doesn't hurt himself.
Yeah, I understand the dilemma.
So, Mr. Chairman, or Mary.
Go ahead, address us.
What, if that comes to pass and the motion is not approved, what is the impact on the
Will
applicant?
put me out of business.
No, we wouldn't put them out of
No, I
business. You
mean,
had 2
can
years to
they-
go.
Can they come back before us?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
He's got 2 years before he can come back to us.
And he can't do retail sales
He
there.
can't do the retail sales that technically he's been doing.
Right.
Because frankly, somebody, in my own opinion, somebody missed it. I mean, people have been going in and out, and it's what they've been doing, and it's, I think, a legitimate, honest mistake that
Oh,
came up, and they're trying to fix it. So,
Without question, yes.
so, I hate to see themselves put themselves in jeopardy by us taking a no vote, or having a vote that doesn't pass by 5. So, I mean, and we're still a short board, so.
I agree with what you're saying, Mary. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
I want to recognize him because he was before you.
The parking spaces are there. You're selling stuff now. All this is doing is retroactively kind of
Yeah.
putting,
Legalizing what's there.
legalizing what's already there.
When we went for our pouring permit,
Right.
it was then brought to my attention that, wait a minute, we got to get our i's dotted and our t's crossed. We weren't aware of that.
Who, as a matter of interest, who granted you the pouring permit, the Board of Selectmen?
No, we haven't,
No,
But
there's-
when you do apply for one, where do you apply?
the selectmen.
I thought so. Okay, go ahead.
Mr.
And
Chair, so,
that's secondary to us, actually.
The
I-
TTP, we have to get approved by the TTP.
Okay, go ahead.
so, Mr. Chair, I would hate to, if the fire department doesn't comment, that's a comment, in my eyes. If they're like, you know what, they're like, oh, we got bigger fish to fry. Like, they've been doing this for years. It's fine. It was probably an oversight. They're just trying to get this done. I mean, that's the way I see it. I don't want to penalize a business that's been doing great, and for them to have to come back 2 years later and not be able to do any retail in that time, I think that'd be, no, well, I guess pun intended, it'd be a crushing blow.
Him first.
Down at Camelot, in the parking that's up against the back of the building on the other side, there are electric, gas meters. Right there, admittedly, there's a curb there, but if the concern is safety, that somebody may drive in over that and into the meter and causing gas escapes, then I don't know how it got approved at Camelot.
There's a lot of things about Camelot that I wonder about, but that's for
Not ready
another day.
yet either,
Mary,
maybe.
next, please.
So my only comment is if,
You're still discussing
We're
whether to
still
close the
discuss-
meeting.
correct.
Yeah.
So there's a motion and a second on the floor to close the public hearing. Presuming that we would then close the public hearing and go to a vote. My concern is if the subsequent vote is not gonna get 5, then I would prefer to request that we withdraw the motion to close the public hearing, go back to continue it, so that a board member can get the satisfaction, hopefully, that he needs
That's where I
from
was
the fire
going.
department. However, I'm disappointed. I would have thought this should have been as simple
I thought this was,
as that.
Can we
Me too.
poll the board, Mr. Chairman, before a vote?
I don't know.
The zoning board of appeals does straw polls. I am not a big proponent of that. What you may ask of those two who voted for the continuance, would one of them be willing to vote in favor? It's not really straw poll, because you already know how everybody else, I think, is gonna vote.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Then I would do the, I would,
If
my
somebody moves to
recommendation is
continue,
to
I think that's
withdraw.
what's,
yeah,
So
withdraw
you've got a
first.
motion and a second on the table, so the only way we can do that is by the
Withdrawing
motion
those.
getting withdrawn.
yeah.
And I'm
So-
sorry to
prepared
ask,
to
but
withdraw?
I'm
Mr. Harris,
asking.
you made the motion. I think one of your counterparts is asking that you withdraw your motion to close the public
With
hearing.
apologies.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, and the second.
I think
Harry,
the
you seconded.
Second, then, yes, obviously.
Okay, and do we have a motion to
And I would-
continue?
I'd make a motion to continue the public hearing to September 10th, no later than 6:30 PM, with the hope that the fire department will respond for Mr. Chadwick.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Matters continued to September 10th. Hopefully, we can resolve it.
Yes.
So what do we do?
You have to come back on
Come back September 10th.
Do I have to notify all the
No.
abutters again?
No.
No re-notifying the butters. The hearing has been continued.
So we didn't close the hearing, so
September
it's
10th.
considered the same.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Next matter on the agenda is KNT Realty Trust, care of John D. McAwee, PLS.
You need to open this hearing, sir, by reading it into the record.
Okay. John D. McAwee, PLS, representative for Timothy M. and Kerry A. Blanchard, as owners, seeks approval of a two-lot definitive subdivision with waivers and a panhandle lot pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, 325.18Q and MGL Chapter 41, Paragraph 81K through GG. The proposal will eliminate Saltwater Lane as shown on the land court plan, 11783D, and the property is located at 2, 6, 10, 14, and 0 Saltwater Lane, map 4, parcels A1 to, A5, A1 to A9, in the RL zoning district. Okay, also from KNT Realty Trust.
I'm John McElwee from Coastal Engineering. I'm going to present the plan here today. What we have existing is, on this site, is a subdivision plan was created in 1974, which created 4 buildable lots at that time. The zoning at that time, I'm assuming, was somewhere around 15,000 square feet per lot, based on my calculations of the lot area. That subdivision was part of your package. I do have a copy here if you'd like to see it. But this is what exists here now. Due to increases in permitting and zoning in the area, we felt it would be best, the best use for this property to modify that subdivision that I just described and approach the board with what you have in front of you. The site has approximately 2.39 acres in total. 1.91 acres is considered upland by today's standards. We are proposing 2 lots. The first lot, which is going to be lot number 10, has frontage on Riverside Drive. It has 164 feet of frontage. It meets the upland and shape requirements of the town. And we also are proposing lot 11, which is more or less the rear lot, and it's a panhandle lot, which is allowed under the zoning bylaws here in Harwich. We have the appropriate frontage in excess of 35 feet. We have 35.65 feet. The length of the panhandle is 167 feet, which is less than the maximum required. We meet the shape requirement for the town of Harwich, but there is one little item that we could not conform with this particular application, and we will be seeking a variance from the Board of Appeals. The panhandle itself is supposed to be 35 feet. The best we could do is a 24-foot panhandle on this particular lot. So if the plan is approved, we'll be seeking relief from the Board of Appeals on that. And so with that, we are also asking for a couple of waivers. They're pretty customary for this particular application. We've eliminated the road, and so we're not creating any new ways. So we are asking for a waiver of section 400-10-B for plan and profile, and cross-section requirements for road design. Also, another waiver we're asking for is section 400-11-D, which is a performance guarantee bond. With this particular subdivision, with no construction, the only real thing that the applicant would be required to do is to set the bounds at the corners, and we've already done so. So that, I don't think that the applicant should be burdened with performance guarantee. So we're asking for that waiver also. At this time, I open it up for any questions you may have.
Members of the board? Go ahead.
Could I again ask that we get Charlene to
Certainly.
report first?
Sure.
We did hear today from the town engineer, who indicated that the plans note that a variance will be required for panhandle lot width being less than 35 feet wide minimum, concur with and want to reiterate the need for zoning relief. And second, I'm fine with the waivers with the stipulation that drainage shall be maintained on the subject properties to a maximum extent practicable, and that also CONSCOM filing will also likely be required. CONSCOM commented, lots are within conservation jurisdiction and will need approval before any development begins. They are subject to a 60-foot no-build zone from the top of the bank. Building, fire, highway, and police have no concerns, and the health department will be reviewing this at their meeting on September 10th. For my own comments, I don't have any concerns with this application. I don't have any concerns with them needing the relief from zoning. However, the board cannot take final action until the Board of Health has commented on the subdivision. So I have recommended that the board continue this to a date after the September 10th date with Board of Health. The next meeting would be September 24th.
Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion and continue this to,
There is
I
public,
do have a
Oh,
question.
public,
maybe.
okay.
so
Yeah,
you
there's
do
some
want
questions.
public.
Okay.
I do have
Yeah.
a question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McElway, I took a ride out there the other day and I was totally confused. Can you point out there are existing structures on the, I guess it's the north side of the driveway or the street, Saltwater, correct?
There's no structures on this site.
There are no structures.
Vacant property.
Where are the, where is the vacant property in relation to the structures that are to the north of Saltwater Lane?
Yeah, they're shown on the plan. I can point them out right here.
It's the house right there. That right here, right here.
Dwelling right here, and a shed for the neighbors right there. They're about 10 feet off of the boundary line.
Not on the two lots, though.
That's correct.
It's on the next lot over.
That's right.
So those.
Go ahead, excuse
two-
me.
Excuse me. Those two structures that you just pointed out, excuse me, are north of that boundary line,
That's correct.
correct? So when I took a ride out there, the street was actually, how do I describe it? Just on this side of that north boundary line. So,
I'm not, which street is that?
Saltwater.
Saltwater doesn't
Saltwater-
exist on the ground, it's a paper
It does-
road.
That road was the road, when, back in 74, the road, when it was approved, the subdivision was never
Okay.
acted
So
on
the
or
street sign that
constructed.
says Saltwater and dead end is not accurate.
There's another salt, there's another street
It's right,
just
it's on the
north of it.
corner of,
But this is vacant land and there is no actual road.
okay, I'm confused.
Yeah.
Okay? Anybody else have any questions?
It'll be continued. You can have another shot at it.
Maybe I'll take a ride out there with you.
Anybody else on the board?
I will include an aerial photograph.
Okay. I have just one brief question. At the entrance to the little driveway, someday it's going to be called Saltwater Lane, I guess, you have it at 35 feet at the entrance from Riverside Drive,
That's correct.
and then you narrow it down to
24.
24.
That's correct.
Why?
In order to fit on the site, I would either have to, I could leave there were two items, and it's not sure which one would work
All right.
better, but we have the width of the panhandle, and we also have the shape requirement for the town,
Shape requirement of what?
The lots.
for the
22.
lot,
Each of the lots?
each of the lots.
Okay.
And I could not get that to work, and so something had to give. And so I think it's easier to present to a board a narrowing of a panhandle, and the panhandle width here is 35 feet, which I think is more than adequate. So we chose to show the board what we could do with a narrow panhandle Whereas to try and explain to you the difference between shape numbers would probably be almost impossible.
Okay.
So we're trying to do that for clarity
Mary?
and
If I
visuals.
may, the narrowing of the panhandle is why he said he has to go to zoning board of
ZBA.
appeals for a variance.
Your board.
No, zoning board of
Oh,
appeals.
zoning, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else on the board have any questions? Anybody in attendance have any questions with respect to this matter? You need to go to the microphone, please, and please give us your name.
Hi, my name is Lori Lascombe. I live at 113, which is right to the
113 Riverside, ma'am?
Riverside Drive, yes. I'm just wondering what the plan is for the panhandle, the driveway. So this will not be called Saltwater Lane,
It would not be,
if I understand correctly.
because it's not a road.
It's a panhandle to the property.
So each lot would
It's a
have an
driveway.
address off of
On
Riverside.
Riverside Drive.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, my concern
believe
is
go ahead, ma'am.
the proximity of our house to the boundary. How close are you? Will there be space for vegetation between the boundary and the driveway, or what?
That's something over which we don't have jurisdiction. What happens is, if he finally gets the lots, which he sounds like he will, maybe not tonight, but he will get them, and then goes to build, he or somebody goes to build, they go to the building inspector, and the building inspector determines where on the lot
Right.
the building will be.
Okay, but you decide on the width of the panhandle. Is that correct?
No,
That's not, okay.
yeah.
If I might, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's okay. So when this goes to the zoning board of appeals, you certainly can bring that up at that point. Generally, it goes in the center of the panhandle portion of the lot. However, you can certainly ask as part of the variance requirement or request that they snug that up to the northerly lot line of the panhandle lot, so
Okay.
it will be closer to lot 10 rather than your parcel.
Okay,
Without all the detail, the fact of the matter is, obviously, he's trying to get as many lots as he can out of the piece
Figured
of
that.
property. I'm sure you understand.
yes.
Anybody else in attendance who wishes to be heard?
Can I make
Go
a
ahead,
comment?
sir, applicant.
I did submit in the package a typical driveway section. And, I have it here. We have like a 10-foot driveway, and we shifted the driveway over so that we have 9 feet between the driveway and the abutting property line, and then about 5 feet between the proposed lot line. So we did try and take that into consideration.
And you're talking about, when you talk to the driveway, you're talking about the access to the lots, right?
That's correct. Well, the actual paved or gravel or whatever.
And the document I'm
surface.
looking at calls it Saltwater Lane, although somebody's telling me,
No, Joe, you're on
No,
the,
you're
you're on
looking
the
at the
old
land court.
subdivision.
okay,
You've got to go to the coastal engineering
I got it,
and see where the panhandle is there.
yeah.
So Saltwater Lane goes away because they're making those 4 parcels, or 5 parcels into 2. So he's actually reducing the number of parcels that he had. and
Lot
getting
10
rid of
and
the old-
11.
And getting rid of the old subdivision, and getting rid of Saltwater Lane that was required for the old subdivision, and making 2 buildable lots, one of which is a panhandle. And the panhandle, what he's saying is he needs to go to Board of Appeals because of
understand now,
the
yep.
width of the panhandle.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
does now.
It's,
Anybody else have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue the matter?
Make a motion to continue PB 2019-31 KMT Realty Trust to
September
September
24th?
September 24th, not sooner than 6:30 PM.
Second.
All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Matters continued to September 24th.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next matter is John E. Pena and Thomas J. and Jody C. Blue.
You need to open the hearing, and then I'll explain.
Okay? PB 2019-32, John E. Pena and Thomas J. and Jody C. Blue, as owners, care of Kieran J. Healy, PLS, Public Land Surveyor, seeks approval of a three-lot modification of a definitive subdivision with waivers including one panhandle lot pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, 325-18Q, and MGL, Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81K through GG. Properties are located at 1 and 2 Jay's Path, map 72, parcels C1-1 and C1-2, respectively, in the RR zoning district.
On behalf of the applicants, I'm requesting a continuance. There was a mix-up in communication, unfortunately, regarding the requirement for notification of abutters. So abutters were not notified. Therefore, I would
Can't do
request a continuation of this hearing to allow for re-advertising and re-notification of abutters to September 24th.
So, is that enough? Just,
I just looked at the calendar, as
is
long as
that
we
gonna
get.
give them enough time?
Absolutely. If we
Okay.
advertise it on the 5th and the 12th, we're in plenty of time for.
Okay?
Move that we, is it really continuing the
It
public
is
hearing?
continuing
All right, so I
because
move
it
that we
has
can-
been advertised.
Move that we continue the public hearing for PB 2019-32, John E. Pena and Thomas J. and Jody C. Blute until September 24th, no earlier than 6:30 PM.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Matter is continued to September 24th.
Your meetings on the 10th and the 21st are going to be doozies, so bring your pillows.
All right, can we talk, Charlene, about this orthopedic and sports physical therapy thing?
You can talk to Daniel Ojala, who's here. to
Oh,
talk about
God.
this.
And also, we've got the esteemed builder, Lou Seminara, in the audience, and the owner, Rich Qualtar, is here as
We
well.
have the owner come up.
Sure. And we're dealing here with a pretty straightforward request. We got a little bit of a curveball, or two little curveballs, maybe a knuckleball and a curveball, in trying to close this project out. And the simple request here tonight is, we've got everything almost exactly perfect on the plan, except that the building commissioner, in talking with the ADA board, or AAB board, I should say,
Which is the Architectural Access
Architect-
Board at the state.
it said that, you know what, we consider what Rich does here to be a classification which needs 20% of the lot as handicap parking. Now, in my 20 years of practice, I'd never seen that exercise, so it caught me by surprise, and again, it went by everybody before, but here it is. So we're going to restripe it like this to provide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 handicaps. And in doing that, because we're basically using 2 spaces as stripes, we adjusted the parking calculations down just a whisker to match. So that was the estimate for the number of people that would be using the special medical gym out in the back, which is a split use in the building. And then number 2, as try as we might, with a little nip and a tuck here, I think this edge of the radius was widened a couple of square foot, and the dumpster pad was adjusted for a little bit larger concrete pad here. We're a touch over the 30%. It's 356 square feet over on a great big lot of, whatever we are, 66,000 square foot. So it's a fraction of a percent over, but to remedy that, there's 2 courses of action. We could remove some of these, we got kind of excessive backup strips here, and we could strip out a little bit of this concrete. Or, I thought better, let's just go to the zoning board. This site was the Stag Chevrolet, some of you might remember. Across the way, there was 2 huge parking lots. It was like 70% impervious, and we've knocked it all the way down to 30. When we first came to the board, we did propose a little bit more parking, and this board didn't have the authority to exceed the 30% lot coverage. So we said, okay, we'll go down to 30, and we'll come back later and go to the zoning board and request some more. Well, that's now kind of brought us into focus here, and yeah, we were going to do that. So If we could, and we talked with the town engineer, and Sam Speakman is a very able-bodied excavator, he figures he can pull this up for a few $1,000. The $4,400 and then times 150% is 7,000, is more than enough. In fact, he said, if that's what it's gonna take to get paid, I'll go and do it this afternoon, you know? But, no, he said, we're gonna go and we're gonna ask for the relief, and so, it's a pretty minor matter, but it does technically need this board to, kind of okay holding a bond until we go to visit the zoning board, and hopefully get permission to leave it in place, and we'll probably request, maybe not this year or next year, but in a year or two, to add some more spaces here, as well as have that little bit of coverage. So if we're granted that, I think you guys can sign off on the occupancy. We can close it out, get the loan closed, get everybody paid. The site is good, and then we'll go to the zoning board. My guess is, 90% they'll at least give us this relief, and they'll probably give us some more relief. But in the event that we don't, we'll comply and pull that up and come and get our check back. But this board would have to vote to hold a $7,000, check or bond, some instrument that would, and give us an incentive factor to actually get that done. So if we suddenly get a memory lapse, Charlene can go into the drawer and say, well, you want your $7,000 back, you better clean this up, and we'll go ahead and do
I'm
it.
retiring in 10 months and 5 days.
A nice note for the next.
Let me just make sure, you're the DPT?
Yes, I'm the physical therapist. That's correct.
Okay. Are you a DPT?
No, I have a bachelor's in physical therapy and a master's in ortho sports physical therapy.
I'm not trying to snag you. I happen to have,
DPT is
I happen to have a doctor who's a DPT, a daughter who's a DPT.
Yes.
And a professor of it in St. Louis.
Absolutely,
So-
WashU or St. Louis U, great.
Okay. So you now have that new blue building that is over there, right? What color is your building?
Gray.
Gray, okay, all right.
Hearthstone gray.
Right next to the old Stag Chevrolet.
Yeah, correct.
Nice
I know where it is.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's like-
okay.
That's
All right,
great.
members of the board. Anybody have any questions?
So, can I ask for Charlene?
Sure,
Comments?
sure. I keep forgetting. Thank you for carrying me.
That's what we have Mary for. So as far as this request, I actually have absolutely no concerns with them posting, I would say a cash bond check or cash or even Pat's book account with the town's name and everything. What we couldn't figure out was how to draft that document. So if the board is inclined to grant the posting of the $7,000 so that they can get a sign off, so that everybody can get paid. We want to make everybody happy, and that's fine, and they go to the zoning board of appeals. I would ask that the board authorize the chair to sign on the bond document.
I understand.
So that we can get it done quicker rather than having to come back in 2 weeks. We know we can write it, but it was like, all right, we're used to subdivision bonds. And I know in the past, going back to when I was first here as a planner, so many years ago, we did have a document, we just couldn't find it in time for today.
Can you just for the record tell us how you arrived at the number?
Actually, the number was arrived from.
Recommended by the
Yeah, we
applicant?
had initially figured, maybe $5,000 or a little less. I talked to Sam Speakman, he said, that's plenty of money, he looked it over, he said, that's plenty of money.
As to
And
what
then
it
the
would cost?
150%, yeah, the physical cost, so what would they do is just saw cut, grind it up, put it in a stockpile, and put a little loam and seed out. And it's only 356 square feet, so it's very reasonable to do that for $4,600. And then there's an incentive factor of 150%, which brought us up to the 7,000.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? All right, so we're gonna continue this also, right?
No.
What we're gonna do?
I will suggest a motion if you'd like, and
I'd
if
love
somebody
to hear
likes
it.
it, they can just say so moved.
All right,
I move that the board authorize the occupancy permit to be issued by the posting of a bond for $7,000 to cover future removal of small coverage of impervious coverage and/or the ability to go to the zoning board of appeals for necessary relief to expand the parking as they desire.
okay,
So
some,
moved.
And
And-
if I may, and allow the chair of the board to.
And
sign
allow the
off
chair of
any-
the board to
on
sign
any
the bond.
documentation necessary to
Yes.
so
carry out the
hold the,
foregoing.
yeah. Second,
So moved.
So moved again.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and we'll continue the matter?
Nope, it's
You're
done.
done.
Done, okay.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate it very, very much, your careful consideration, and we'll be in touch with the bond very shortly, maybe in the next day or two, and get that
Yeah.
striped and get our
We need
CO,
to
and off we'll go.
talk to figure out how to, because it's not a subdivision one, so I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to messy up the waters with that.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Back of the page.
Can you take one and pass it down?
We're going to talk about the Cape Cod Commission.
We are, and Sarah Korjeff, who is a planner with the Cape Cod Commission specializing in historic preservation, is here. I'm going to come up and sit to talk to you all. I had provided each of you with a packet of information at the last meeting. I also sent you an email that I received with a link, because I tried to send it, which is way too big, with a link to the Eastham application, which I thought would be very helpful for you all to see what's entailed in putting this together, not to frighten you from doing it. It was over 400 pages, but a lot of that documentation was either existing bylaws or reports, and folks, having written letters saying that they want to see something happen here to protect. I've actually already started putting some of that information together. Found that great video that was done. So, just starting to piece things together. If for nothing else, it's good to have this information in one handy spot. So, as you know from the last meeting, the Board of Selectmen did have a discussion at their meeting 2 weeks ago last night regarding sending this to the Planning Board for consideration to look at the West Harwich corridor from Dennisport Town Line to the Herring River as a potential DCPC nomination. We did not get anything in writing from them. I'm not going to wait for that because I don't want to do that. So in your packets, I had previously given you information. Also in the slide presentation, I put some information in there, and I just handed out to each of you a copy of the nomination form itself, so that you can look at that. And I have actually,
No, I got it. Thank you.
Would you be kind enough to identify yourself?
Sure. My name is Sarah Korjeff, and I'm a planner and preservation specialist with the Cape Cod Commission.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, before we get started,
go ahead.
question, please. With all due respect, should Duncan recuse himself from this conversation and potential vote because of the testimony that he's previously given, that he, I think to use his words, this is no-brainer to the Board of Selectmen the other night. So it appears to me that a decision has already been made by a board member without hearing any of the testimony yet. I don't know who that question goes to.
Go ahead.
Because of his testimony, I don't believe that that constitutes a conflict of interest in this matter.
there's no financial gain.
No financial gain. That matter's already been decided.
Which
The-
matter?
The matter that the applicant is withdrawn,
Duncan did at the Selectmen's meeting indicate that he thought a DCPC nomination was a no-brainer, but that, to me, is not enough to have somebody recuse themselves.
yeah.
Duncan, we better hear from you.
Well, I think I've been an advocate for this as a interim solution. I can understand if I need to perhaps recuse myself from voting, but I certainly would like to hear what's going on and have some sort of an input and help shaping the board's awareness of maybe some of the smaller granular details. But I leave it to the board and the chairman's discretion.
But it's not the
It's
board's
not the board's, it's,
decision, it's
yeah,
gotta be
It's-
yours.
it's
it's a-
entirely yours.
Yeah.
If you believe there's a conflict of interest, then, for
So
whatever
then the-
reason, usually it's if there's a financial gain.
Right, I don't have any
But it's-
pecuniary.
Yeah,
No, but it's also if you are,
Predisposed?
no.
No.
Oh, sorry.
we shouldn't be giving legal advice in the middle of a public hearing.
You bet your life.
This is my concern. there is a whole process that you would go through to make a determination as to whether you feel you're comfortable sitting on the board and making a decision. The difference is advocating before a board. If you're part of the group, then you wouldn't necessarily be advocating in front of our board for that group. You can always advocate for your own property, but we really can't make that decision for you.
I think that's your decision. I
Right,
give you
right.
by way of example, a couple of weeks ago, I had I'm a practicing lawyer, just barely these days, but I had a client step up to be a witness. I never knew he was going to testify, never knew he was, finally, in fact, it took me a few minutes to realize who he was, at which point I felt that I had a conflict and that I recused myself, and I did. I went out and sat in the audience. So that's your decision, it's up to you.
I would think, Mr. Chairman, that if Duncan was paid to make that testimony, it'd be a different matter. He was doing it as a citizen.
I'm not going to make the judgment.
I think Duncan has to make his own judgment, and I'm not sure that any.
There's not going to be a vote tonight on anything.
And I don't know that there's any debate going on tonight that
So
would
it's
require him to
presentation.
make that recusal
Right.
at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I may. This is the Planning Board Committee Handbook, and
Mr. Chair, I just have to say, I think this is an inappropriate comment at this point. I think that is a conversation that can be had.
This is a learn more about what a DCPC is, and
This isn't necessarily the decision-making on the application, and I think I think with due respect to one of my board members, I think we should give our other brand-new board member the respect that if he wants to make a phone call to the State Ethics Commission and ask the question as to whether he should recuse himself, we should give him that opportunity and not hash it out in the middle of.
I would
There
agree.
are two practicing lawyers here, and neither one of us want to give him that opinion. So,
Right. So I was simply going to read the document that states, there can be no appearance that a committee member is predisposed either positively or negatively towards the matter under consideration. In all such
and
cases,
I would argue that that
the committee
is
member must recuse her or himself. If aware of the situation, the committee chair should ask the committee
I have a
member
real hard time
to
with
consider the recusal.
Well, that's up to him. It's not up to you.
Or it's up to you.
No,
According to
no,
this.
it's not.
No, it's not.
If aware of the situation, the committee chair should ask the committee member to consider the need to recuse.
And to consider the need to recuse, and then that's his decision to recuse himself. But still, that's a legal decision, and that's a legal interpretation. And as I just said, there are two lawyers sitting here that don't want to give that opinion because it's not, I don't feel it's our place. And I think you've got a new board member sitting here who, for very good reasons, has been involved in West Harwich for a long time, because he's been here longer than probably any of us sitting here. So I think this does I just think this is
As chair,
disrespectful.
as chair, it would be my position that this is up to you.
Well, I'd like to at least sit through the airing.
That's fine
and
with
the
me.
Presentation of material when we get to a point where we have to make a decision. And I can
Then you
see
make-
like lines of cleavage between what's going on. I can very easily drop out,
Okay?
if that's okay. But I
Okay.
think I want to be here while the information is being disseminated about the process.
Okay?
Mr. Chair, could I make a request?
Sure, go ahead.
Could we, with respect to Duncan in that respect, could I request that the chair limits our conversation today to the actual DCPC process, and let's avoid specific talk about West Harwich?
The
For
content.
now,
Right.
is that would that be?
Makes
okay
sense.
With you and the
Yeah.
members of the board? And then there's no question, there should be no question for Duncan sitting in on the meeting tonight.
Okay? Finally, we get a chance for you to tell us.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. So Charlene asked me to come and speak to you a little bit to give you background about what a DCPC, or District of Critical Planning Concern, is. And so I just start by saying it's a tool, a planning tool that's made available to you through the Cape Cod Commission Act. And so the 15 towns of Barnstable County have access to this specific planning tool. It's not otherwise available to the average towns in Massachusetts. Specifically, what a DCPC does is it gives the towns the ability to identify a very specific area of your community where you have concerns about either resource protection or economic development or any of the other issues that are protected by the Cape Cod Commission Act. And so the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board or other town boards can actually define an area of concern and nominate it as a DCPC with the idea that this is an area that would need special regulations in order to address that concern of yours or protect those resources of concern. And you would make that nomination to the Cape Cod Commission. The Cape Cod Commission would consider the nomination, and Charlene has actually put up a milestone sort of flow chart, if you will. There's a very specific process that's laid out, but sort of the short form of it is that if the nomination is accepted by the Cape Cod Commission, then you get what we call a timeout, or a moratorium on development in that area goes into effect. And it allows the town to do planning and analysis and consideration of what new regulations would be appropriate for that area without the pressure of development, forcing you to sort of move too quickly and not giving you enough time to really assess all of your options. I guess the three real main benefits of a DCPC are, one, that the ability to work with a short-term moratorium in place to eliminate some of those pressures. Also, it's a very specifically defined, robust public process, so there are a lot of public hearings, opportunities for members of the public, members of all the town boards, and other interested parties to get involved and to voice their concerns and their interests. And the third piece really is that if a DCPC continues on and actually is established in an area, it can adopt new implementing regulations that would address your resource concerns in that area, and they would not be subject to normal grandfathering that you might have in another situation where you would update your zoning regulations. So those three things can be very helpful. Just by way of example, Charlene mentioned that Eastham had recently gone through this process for a commercial corridor along Route 6. And I think it has some similarities to the
Number of areas.
Yes, to other areas that might be considered. And so it might be of interest to you to see, to go to the Cape Cod Commission website or to look at the information that Charlene has disseminated to see exactly what Eastham did during their DCPC process. They had a number of public hearings. They adopted some very specific implementing regulations after reviewing them with the Board of Appeals, with the Planning Board, with the Board of Selectmen, with the Housing Authority, because housing was an important piece of their DCPC. They also, because their district was established along Route 6, and that's, of course, managed by the Mass DOT, they had additional meetings with Mass DOT to talk about how that issue would affect their interests along in the DCPC. So I guess, I think mostly I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, but maybe by way of summary, I'll say that Cape Cod now has about a dozen district of critical planning concerns, and they have a wide range of interests. Some of them are focused on natural resource protection. Others are focused on community character and the form of commercial development and residential development that that's going to be allowed in a certain area. But I would say that the two districts of critical planning concern that perhaps would be of most interest to your board would be the one in Eastham and then one that was adopted in Craigville and Centerville a number of years ago. Both of those involved zoning that really focused on the form of development that would be allowed in the future. and specifically at the same time looking at resource concerns. And if you want me to walk you through the sort of the milestones, I'd be happy to. But really, the most important thing to know is that it's the town that's making the nomination. You would be, one of the bodies that would have input on what the boundaries of the town's proposed DCPC would be, what its primary interests would be, and throughout the process, the Cape Cod Commission staff would be happy to provide technical support and assist with developing new regulations.
Does there anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, for, say, like a typical, if there is such a thing, a typical nomination, if everything goes smoothly, how long does it usually take for it to?
It's designed to take as close to, well, let's see, less than a year if possible. So, and that's an excellent question. It can vary quite a bit. We've had, I guess I'll just use Eastham's example since it's the most recent one, took less than a year.
Excuse me.
And that was designed, I guess the timeframes were really focused on taking as little time as possible because the town didn't want to have a moratorium in place for very long. And they had also done a lot of advanced thinking about this. This was an area and some issues that they had known about for a while. They'd been identified in their local comprehensive plan. The planning board had been talking about them for a while. And once they had once they began to see more significant concerns about, increased development in that area, and they decided the DCPC was the right tool for them, they were really in a great position to move forward quickly. And they also wanted to set it up so that they could develop their new regulations quickly enough to bring them to the next town meeting. And just based on the time frame, I believe that they did that in, I believe they developed the regulations in less than 6 months. And overall, the process took about 9 months.
Anybody else have any questions of this lovely person?
I don't have a question, but I just want to compliment you. I think it's a terrific tool for the kind of problems that have been addressed in the examples. The decision tree is very clear as to how it works. We revert back to regulatory process and stay in the approval process. I was quite impressed with it, so thank you for developing it.
Charlene?
Thank you.
Have you found that in some communities that some of what has been developed in the DCPC as regulations has actually gone out to other areas of the towns and other zoning? Or could that happen?
It absolutely could happen. I can't think of an example right now where that's happened yet, but I could imagine certainly that, a lot of times the towns really benefit from the extra focus that goes into developing regulations in a DCPC. And so if they had similar areas of town, I could see it, once they see that it's working, it would be easy to take that set of regulations and then apply it to another part of your community.
Okay. Anybody else?
So I just have a question on the lack of grandfathering. So are we talking a situation where a use has been disbanded for, say, a year and a half and hasn't quite met the time frame? New use comes in, would it be prohibited under your regulations? I'm trying to think of the scenario where the grandfathering isn't.
One of them is also zoning freezes, which I remembered, and that's why I have this little cheat sheet. If a lot of times if there's going to be a zoning amendment, I know when I started my carear
Sure, you
in a
rush to the
neighboring
clerk's
town,
office. Right.
there were probably a dozen subdivision plans submitted, both preliminary and definitive, to freeze zoning. That wouldn't happen. So
Okay.
if this went in, if an application was made, regardless of where it is, if an application is made and a division of land is brought forward during that time when there's a moratorium, it's not protected under the zoning, assuming that it goes forward.
Right.
If it doesn't end up going forward, then it would revert back, but if the moratorium, you know,
But
creates
they're not
the new
getting,
bylaws.
they're not getting old zoning by the
Exactly.
National Clerk's office to get it stamped in.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah, and that's really the primary use of grandfathering protection under the DCPC as opposed to the use that you talked about. I think the fact is when the town creates a DCPC and adopts implementing regulations, they can establish what uses they want to allow to go forward, and they can establish new dimensional regulations or you know, zoning district boundaries or overlay district boundaries they want. It's, and uses that are in existence at that time are not going to be, you know, not going to be allowed to, or not going to be forced to stop. But anyone who's tried to protect their rights by filing sort of a subdivision plan in
Understood.
advance,
Thank
that's
you.
what it would be affected.
Yes, sir.
Now, for this to move forward, the application, would it have to go before the Board of Selectmen make the decision, or would it have to go before a town meeting?
No, it doesn't take town meeting for a nomination. For a nomination, the planning board can propose it. However, in looking at the checklist, item H, which you have the first page, does indicate municipal agencies only. Attach selectmen's comments in the proposed nomination if the nomination is being made by the planning board, health, historic. So it would have to go to them for, you know, their comments.
Thank you.
Go
If I
to,
could-
The Board of Selectmen would
Thank
have
you.
to weigh in.
okay, Mary?
If I may, Charlene, this has been referred, obviously referred to us from planning from the selectman's office.
Right, only
I'm-
verbally, I've nothing. in
Understood
writing.
that.
Yeah.
Understanding that, the question for me is, you know, looking at that list, can planning board accept a historic commission or someone else's,
Oh, absolutely.
support on it? So-
Absolutely.
So can the
Yeah.
historic,
Public
the
support,
Historic Commission
anybody's
can-
support. Yeah,
can sign on to the application with the
Absolutely.
planning board?
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
And if I could add to that, I think it's important to remember that the Cape Cod Commission will be reviewing the nomination, and they're not required to accept it. You know, we haven't had many nominations that have been declined, but the best way to ensure that a DCPC nomination will be accepted is to show broad support in the town. And
More the
so the
merrier.
number of boards that you can get signing on in support, the better off you are.
Okay, well, we don't take any action tonight.
No.
No.
No?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, for the rest of the board, if you go to the capecodcommission.org site, they have a good map of the ones that have been passed.
Yes.
And you have Barnstable that has the affordable housing one,
We have one here in Harwich.
and one in Harwich. There's a lot of, they have the ocean,
6 pounds, yeah.
yep, a lot of ocean, freshwater.
Where's the one in Harwich?
Six Pond Special District.
So it's a good map, but it goes through a lot of the history of all the ones that have been approved.
Yes.
And it goes through ones that have been also nominated. You know, fertilizer management, I think was one. But it's a good site that gives a lot of background to it.
Thanks, Alan.
And on that site, if you're interested in really reading more, we have this document called the
They
DCPC
got hard
guidance
copies
document.
of
Oh, you did?
everything.
Yeah, we
Excellent.
have it here.
So that should help answer any questions you might have after today's hearing, too.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
A question. I think you mentioned that if a DCPC is approved, then the town, CCC comes back and works with the town collaboratively to
Dark blue.
determine new zoning rules and regulations? Did I-
What we call implementing regulations. Some may be
Implement.
zoning regulations or they might be other forms of regulation.
And I think you said that one of the regulations might be the type of business that could be approved in the DCP zone?
Use regulations. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or size.
Yep.
Of a building
Yeah,
Okay.
there, it could be anything, really.
Could it be so specific that You say you can't have a Dollar General store, but you can have a Sally Sells Seashells store.
I would say that would likely not be allowed under, zoning in Massachusetts, so no. That would not be the focus. You'd have to be developing regulations that focus on the type of development you want to see, the form of development you want to see, the type of use, but not a specific particular person or business.
I can't imagine that, you'd have to have a list that.
Yeah, I don't think it would
Possibly
work.
think of
I mean,
every-
there's been a lot of discussion about dealing with franchises and whether there are some towns on the Cape included that have adopted regulations that specifically address franchise developments. There's more than one way to do that. Some ways seem to be more successful than others, so that could be part of the discussion, certainly, when the town's
There's
ready
also
to.
court cases that say, you can't do that.
That's right. It needs to be looked at very carefully, and I think we would, if we were working with Harwich on developing and implementing regulations, we would spend a lot of time thinking about what's the best approach for you to get what you need without getting you into a position where you might find yourself in court arguing something.
Charlene, is there a next step for our board?
Right now, no.
I didn't think so, but I
Without
wanted to make sure.
getting into specifics. But a couple things, as Sarah described, the town may look at an area, the board may look at an area and say, even though this is zoned residential, it would be better suited as commercial, or vice versa. There may be areas that really shouldn't be zoned what they're zoned right now. That is a distinct possibility, and, those are the kind of things that the board may want to consider when looking at this. If
Okay,
they're
go
looking
ahead,
at this,
Doctor.
regardless of where they're looking at it.
Well, I think the reason it was taken up at the Board of Selectmen was that there was one selectman in particular who was concerned about the clock that was running on a demolition delay for the Captain Baker House at the corner of West Depot and 28. And so,
We know it well.
right, so that was like, that whole issue, it was the timing of that, which was their concern, and that was the context for the statement of no-brainer for their sense of urgency, right?
And this is legitimate. If I recall correctly, reading the paper, somebody was setting up house there within the last week or two until the police evicted them.
Yeah.
Well, there was a fire.
Till they
Yeah, they were cooking supper,
Yep.
according to what the paper said.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Just in response to Duncan, I have a number of questions, and I think there are a lot of things that we need to talk about before we're ready to take a vote on this. But we agreed that we're not going to talk about specifics here tonight. That'll be for some future time. So I just want to let that be known that I think we need to proceed cautiously and very deliberatively. And I recognize what you just explained about Mr. Howell's desire because of the demo delay expiration.
Right.
But I'm concerned that if that's the driving factor, I don't know if this is the best approach to handle that particular little item. And again, I know we're not going to get into specifics, so I'll just leave that
That
at
was the
that.
driver behind my comment, that's all.
Okay, anybody else?
Can I
Okay,
just add one last thing? I think one thing that the town should also be prepared to think about is, I mentioned a moratorium going into effect once a DCPC is established, but the town has the ability to define types of development that you want to allow to go forward, even if there is a moratorium in effect. A lot of towns, for example, might still allow single-family homes to be constructed. They would certainly still allow basic repair and maintenance that might require a building permit to still go forward, things like that. And so you should just be thinking about that when you make your nomination. That will be one of the questions that that is asked, what types of development would you like to still allow to go forward versus what types of development would you want to have put on hold while you're doing the planning for the area?
So at some point, members of the board, we're going to have to decide whether or not we want to refer.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I think it's a continuing discussion that I'd like to see come up under old business next meeting.
Sure.
Depending on the length of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm
Because
not
we
sure
have-
if you may not want to have like a separate meeting. We know
Just
how
to
we get-
discuss this?
Just to discuss, you know, we know how we get at the end of meetings.
Yes, we
can
do.
get a little punchy sometimes,
do.
so, you
But
know.
I-
Probably
my
not some
own-
of your best discussions have happened at the end of meetings.
Or
My only
they're
point
the
is-
best.
My only point is I think the Board of Selectmen referred it to us to take a look, so I think we should.
Sure.
And Sarah Cordiff was kind enough to come out on a Tuesday night to give us some details on the process, so.
Is it your understanding that at some point we need to vote?
I think we
To
need
refer it?
I think we either vote to refer it, or we say we don't think we want to refer it, and we report that back to the selectmen. I think those are your.
Okay, those are our options,
That's what I would think.
Right.
okay?
As
Charlene?
the town planner, who actually I'm loaned to you, I actually work for the town administrator. I am moving forward with putting together what I will need to put together. And when you are ready to say to me, we'd love to see what you've got put together, I'm happy to share that.
Yay.
I don't see how we can
Even
make
if
a
it's in a
decision
draft
one way or the
form.
other till we see that.
We'll talk about when we put that on the agenda, because it's going to
Well,
take some time.
yeah, you and I will talk about
Sure.
agendas.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
excuse me. Lost my train of thought.
Okay? Keep looking for it.
I will.
Anything further?
Question for
Can I get a motion on the minutes of July 30th and August 13th?
Just thank Sarah to,
Yeah.
thank Sarah.
Thank you,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Oh, thank you, sorry.
And also, if people have
Thank
other
you very much.
questions regarding this,
Oh,
email
I
them
thought
to me, and I will get the answers from Sarah or other staff at the commission. So
I
if you do have
remembered
more
my
questions, feel
to
happy to
accept the
reach out to me.
I remembered my question of Sarah.
There's
Who
two sets.
sets the parameters for the
The criteria?
DCPC zone? Who
You mean
says
the
it's North
boundaries,
Street,
sort
South
of?
Street,
You
East
do.
and West?
Yeah, so that would
We
be
do?
proposed, the town,
nominee
part of the
is.
nomination
Okay.
is to define the boundaries that you're proposing. It's possible that as part of the Cape Cod Commission's deliberations and deciding whether or not to accept your nomination, that they might suggest slightly different boundaries, or during the process, those boundaries potentially could change, but,
I may go to property lines instead of a straight line kind of thing.
but the initial proposal would come from the town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of August 13th and July 30th.
second,
Second.
go ahead.
On July 30th, I request that my name as a member present be removed because I was not here.
Because you were not present.
I wasn't on July 30th.
Were you on the
Okay.
phone? Were you on the phone, Dave?
No,
No.
he's been back.
Okay,
No, I had surgery that day, so I wasn't able to.
so you move to amend. Sure. Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Done.
Abstained.
Okay. Do you need our signatures on anything?
Yes, I do. Please sign it, even if you're missing a middle initial where we typed your name in. We need your signature as you would sign it on subdivision plans. There's 2 here, please. So if you would sign as appropriate, make sure you sign over your own name. I've had people not do that before
Imagine.
and mess
I
it all
can't be
up.
Joe McFarland.
Not me.
Charlene, it may not have happened that way, but why don't we approve the minutes one at a time? I abstained on the
No,
30th,
we already know what you approved on the one you weren't
but
here.
the other one's okay.
Yeah, no, yeah,
And Madam Secretary, you'll
we got it.
make the minutes appropriate.
She who writes the minutes controls the meeting.
Katie's got us covered.
Sorry, Joe. Can we have a discussion about the future meeting while we're doing this?
Keep talking.
Okay. I will not be able to attend on September 10th,
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
but I would very much like to participate in this discussion. And I noted that at the selectmen's meeting last night, the chairman suggested delaying a discussion and a vote in order to have a full board in attendance, and that was accepted and approved. And I wondered if the same procedure, policy, regulation, whatever, applies here.
I'm not sure if I have an answer to that question.
First of all, you haven't had a full board here in ever, for a very long time.
Right.
So, and I don't know, thank you, I'll come and get them, David, or you can bring them to me. Don't trip over the cords, please.
Fact of the matter is, we don't have a full board, don't we?
No,
have-
you do.
do now.
You do now.
What about the alternates?
We don't have alternates.
Yeah. That's all.
But, you know, having everybody here, people are sick, things come up with kids where people can't show up. You know, my feeling, my opinion, it's a democracy. If you're here and able to vote, you are. If you're not, you don't. So, but that's just me. So whatever the pleasure of the board is.
And
And I would
And what's
say,
the- what's the-
Charlene, what you said is very true. But it's not unheard of based on what I observed last night. I mean, the same
yeah.
thing happens with the selectmen there.
Yeah,
Steve wasn't there last night, so.
They're the first board I've ever known who actually does that. So, I mean, it's whatever you all decide.
That's
you
why
wanna
I
do.
asked the question. I don't know what.
But they're not a regulatory board with time deadlines like we are on
Right.
a lot of things either. So that's the other half of the problem. I don't know that that applies in this one.
Yeah, I don't
Okay,
think that
any
applies.
briefings or reports by board members?
So did we have a decision on that, Joe?
What's the question?
I will not be here at the September 10th meeting, but I would like to participate in the discussion of the potential for a application to CCC for the DCPC.
Are you gonna be someplace where we can put you on the,
I'll be in Nantucket, in a place that cell phone coverage stinks,
So
and I can't change it.
then I guess you just don't get to
How about
participate in
Wi-Fi?
that one.
About a Wi-Fi phone?
I really am not disposed to realign all of our meetings because of an inability of one or some to not be able to attend.
Do we think we will be at a point of making a decision at that meeting?
I don't know.
We'll have minutes and so on that would be available for review, so you can see what the discussion was, and then participate in subsequent meetings.
I mean, it's not
Yeah,
like a
if there is a
regulatory.
subsequent
right, it's
meeting.
not
Right.
like it's not like it's a subdivision or.
Yeah, it's not a
Right.
public hearing or regulatory matter. So, I mean, even if the board discussed it on the 10th,
Right.
I don't know
There's
what you
no-
guys
And-
need to
and-
discuss.
And really, quite frankly, I don't think that there is a time factor for us to make a decision on referring it to the Board of Selectmen. I know that they have asked that we do it as quickly as possible because of the demo delay, but I don't know that that's a reason to say, you know, we have to do it by the 10th or do it by the 24th. If it takes 3 meetings worth of questions and conversation back and forth, as I said before, I think we need to be very deliberate and very cautious and make sure that we've considered what this means to everybody involved.
I think we are very deliberate and very cautious, and we always have been. And we were very deliberate and very cautious about West Harwich in general. So I have no reason to think any of us are gonna be otherwise.
Well, if you wanna write a check, we'll all get on the ferry and come over to Nantucket.
Come on down.
Okay, just briefings and reports by board members. I'm your representative on the capital outlay. And we now have a series of scheduled meetings where essentially what happens is each department comes in and presents their budget to capital outlay, and then we review it. We review the budget and their perspective out 5 years. And I just received a correspondence in the mail in the last couple of days, setting up those meetings. Anybody else have any reports?
So I'll just say, CPC, we'll start, we did not meet in August, we will meet in September. Applications for CPC funding for this round are due by October 1st. So you may start getting requests for agendas. If
Yes.
if there's anything that comes, if there are any applications that would apply to planning board, CPC has in the past asked that the applicants go before their respective boards for approval and support before the October 1st deadline. CPC was kind and extended that deadline to December last year because nobody had really come forward and gone through that step. So I anticipate having a number of items on my historic agenda for historic applications.
And there will be a couple on the planning board
People started
agenda,
coming
just getting
forward.
support.
So.
We're
I
going to
would
be
just-
looking for some money?
You won't be, but we're gonna be looking for funding for other, projects.
Okay, we'll talk about
Which I
that.
think
That may
planning
require
board-
planning board
yes,
permitting
I
or
think planning
support.
board would be good to have the board
Now,
support.
who chairs that?
So CPC is chaired by David Nixon, who is the Recreation and Youth Representative. So that round of applications will, as I said, is due October 1st. And then we go through pretty much double or triple meetings a month to kind of
Who else
vet those
sits on the board,
applications.
if you can remember?
So I'm the planning board representative. You're
Did the Rios
Joe-
rep get approved?
no, Rios has not been, I believe that was referred to the interview committee last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting.
What's Rios?
Real estate and open space.
Committee.
Oh,
John Ketchum is the conservation representative. Chris Rocket is one of the selectmen's reps. I'm trying to think who else is on the board.
Is there a
Rios hasn't
historical
been filled.
commission member?
Historic
Mr.
commission
Doan.
member is Bob Doan.
Bob Doan.
And housing committee is Joe McFarland Jr. And housing authority, I believe, is one of the new members, and I haven't been at a meeting that she's attended yet, but I believe it's Kim Borja, but I have to double check that.
thank you very much.
How much money do you have, Mayor,
We don't know yet. We'll see what the number is when,
after taxes?
once the numbers come through and the
From the
money
state.
gets certified. Yeah,
Yeah.
the numbers have to get
Okay,
certified.
anything further? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.